All right, we can start the debate under the motions of registry, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. We call Prime Minister to start the debate.
Am I audible?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I will set my timer first. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels nowadays, many people getting into a relationship without knowing their partner, and why is it really bad? Because they are just like buying something in a box without knowing what is the person really is, because they don't know which is the person is good or bad, because they just look on the face, on the mask that the partner is always use, because they're just always good all the time, because we cannot see their entirely life which is good or bad. And in here we want at least the people know itself that the partner have the flaws and can prevent it from getting into a bad relationship. And our goal, we want to create a better relationship. Our definition of the registry is it is upon the request of current or former romantic partners and pending independent verification, a permanent record of non-criminal bad behavior from previous romantic relationship can be created. The behavior can include, but is not limited to, cheating, ghosting, lying, controlling behavior, or etc. etc. That is bad and counterproductive to the relationship itself. And our stance is this house regret a world in which this house prefers a world in which the registry is exists. So I will bring two contribution in this debate. The first one is why is it justified, and the second of all, why is it better in our side of the house? So first of all, why is it justified? So in my ideal world, we want that every partner know the good side and also the bad side of the couple itself, because we not only want to know the one side, it is the bright side, but we also want to know what is the bad side of the couple anyway. So why is it so important? Because every partner deserves to know what is the good side and the bad side of the couple itself, because they are addicted and they are affected to those kind of couple. They have commitment because they want to depend on each other. We want to know which person that we want to depend on is really good, or they have some kind of dark side. And we want, maybe in this relationship, they want to engage with something more, that is like to go to relationship. They want to have a marriage, that they want to live together, they want to dependable and have kids together, that they want to raise kids together, and they will always go and they will always meet each other, which is really important to know what is kind of person that we are going to be committed with. So the problem in the status quo is when the phase of want to get know and close to each other in the phase that not become in the relationship, they only show the good side of things. For example, when someone like someone, they want to show their good behavior, such as like they're caring, they're loving, and they're really want to give the best of all, but they don't know that inside of this heart they want to be a controlling, or they have a tendency of abusive. So we just tricked by the good face and the good mask that they already do, and it is by the false hope. So people just give their fake face, right, by the mask. How to fix it? By implementing the narrative. At least there are more people that are aware about before getting into the relationship. We want that more people are aware what is the condition of the people itself, so they will think of the consideration and accept whoever it is, if they want to engage more in the relationship or they want to leave it. So we want people have the consideration, and we want people to aware about it. And then move to my second substances. What is it better in our side of the house? So my ideal word is we want to people have the correct expectation about their partner, and have a more better relationship, because it is, and we want, it is better than nothing. We want more people and more people aware about it. But what is the problem under the status quo? The status quo, there is a lot of romanticization of the film. Like there's a lot of Korean drama or Chinese drama that show that relationship is always be cute, and we will have always the good ending at the end. So people just imagine if they have the partner, they want to have a partner like that. because of the narrative in status quo, there's a lot of romanticizing. So we want to have a partner like that. We have an expectation about that, and plus about I have and plus the partner itself show a good attitude at the first time. But in the real life, there is the couple itself have flaws. It is which is dangerous, such as like jealousy and control and abusive, and they are not realizing it because they just look their innocent look at the time and the romanticization. Then how to solve it in our cellular house when there is the narrative that is this regularity. We have the people we have the characterization. The first one is the people before attending the relationship. So before it, people are more aware and considerate what is the partner is toxic or not. If they are toxic, they will think twice if they really want to go to that relationship or not, because it is so important for them, because they are the vulnerable actor here, that which will be really affected to the people that is abusive, because they will the one who will always get the harm from the boyfriend, from the partner itself. For example, like they will be always be controlled by the partner or etc. So they will be have the consideration if they want to have a partner like that or not. So and then the second characterization is the people that after have the, have the relationship with other people, and then they realize from the regulation that is some that the partner that he's dating for and have the relationship is abusive. So you want the people notice that the partner is wrong, because in term of this, people often blind of love because they think that it is okay, it is good, it is abusive, it is cute, because people just always romanticizing it in now, because people not realizing it. So but now, if when this narrative is occurred, they're more aware and think more to get out of that relationship, because there is something not criminal but it is abusive, and there is people who don't it is think it is really bad, and they will uh think if they want to stay or not, because it is harm very harmful if they just stuck in the relationship without knowing that they're just being manipulative by the love that they don't even know, and it is hurting them slowly. And then we just want to know that we just want to ensure that they are no, and they can decide whether they want to go out of the relationship or not. Just we want to them to aware why we will be better in relationship, because we want to people to prevent to enter the bad relationship, and we want people to aware, that is make the aware of the situation itself, that can change their mind and open their mind. How about the people itself? So I already explained to you why is it better in our side of the house and why is it justified.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. To continue, LO.
Uh,
Yeah, you're echoing so hard.
Check, am I audible?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. For the PI preference, please just write it in the chat box, because I'm going to be standby on my chat box. And yeah, for apalagi ya, oh yeah, my preferred gender pronoun is he him, please. Bentar gue stopwatch dulu. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So before I'm going to my case, there are several engagement that I think very important for our opposition to make to against the case of team government today, right? Number one, they tell you that it is very important for every single individual to have a healthy relationship where they can be open about their partner, for example. We think that, number one, we don't necessarily oppose the idea of people having a healthy relationship where they can be open towards one another. The burden of proof that team government needs to explain is that why then this is something that the government needs to regulate up until the government need to be able to accommodate the people to make this public registry to begin with, right? Because I think that if they are not able to explain to this, I don't necessarily think that their case is going to be exclusive at the end of the day. But second of all, we think that the idea of registry might not necessarily able to succeed all of the benefit that has been proposed by team government today. Why is that so? Because they never mechanize to you how then people at the end of the day, for example, will utilize this public registry at the end of the day. all of the benefits saying that it will really reflect the story behind a certain relationship, if they tell you about the benefits saying that it will really reflect the behavior of certain individuals, it is highly contingent if people are able to, for example, report certain things in their public registry based on a very objective point of view to begin with, right? But I think that what they forget to analyze is that the problem that most probably exists in the relationship, for example, is a type of problem that is very interpersonal and very unique to one problem to another problem, right? So this is the reason why you cannot universally objectify certain subjective point of view, for example, because we think that this is bad, right? Most likely, for example, you are not going to utilize this public registry. This is the reason why the outcome that is coming from team government is not going to be solid. I'm going to engage further in my point of substantive. But what do we stand for in team opposition, right? As opposition, we think that this public registry better to not exist at all. Why is that so? There are several things that we consider. Number one, we think that when it comes to relationship or non-criminal behavior, such as lying, for example, or ghosting, or you are being cheated by certain individual, it is very hard for you, for example, to determine and might not necessarily have the impacts towards the states at the end of the day, right? And number two, we think that the world where public registry exists will only make the interaction between the people, for example, to be an ideal, right? We're going to mechanize to you as to why this is true at the end of the day. So moving on to my first point of substantive. Let's talk about whether or not this public registry is justified to exist in the very first place, because I think that this is something, the burden of proof that team government never explained to you as to why then the government is justified to go to this certain extent, right? First of all, I would like to characterize to you what kind of information of people that is allowed to be disclosed to the public and why these non-criminal problems such as ghosting, lying, and cheating is not included, ladies and gentlemen. In order for you, for example, to make order in the society, in the vast majority of cases, you're going to be regulated by law. This law is going to be functioned to determine what is the behavior that is allowed for you to perform and what are the behaviors that is not tolerable for you to perform, right? What law do we have in the current status quo? We have criminal law and civil law. What are they? How do they distinct in the very first place? I think that this is a very important contextualization that I would like to give to you. So first of all, let's talk about the criminal law, right? Criminal law most likely runs your business with the states, for example. We're talking about certain individual, for example, terrorizing civilians with bombs and etc. that might threaten the idea of public safety, right? Not only this, but this also can be extended to the cases like rapists and murderers, ladies and gentlemen, where certain individuals can simply normalize the idea of killing of certain individual. This condition, countries are justified to intervene because it gives harm to the states and people involved in that territory, ladies and gentlemen, and considered as a criminal, right? This is the reason why this is justified for certain states to intervene with this type of crime. Furthermore, civil law is the type of law that settles the interpersonal disputes among individuals. This is to say that there are certain conditions and terms that might be agreed by both of the actors involved, even if the terms and conditions are not within the initial regulations of the country, because that is the bilateral agreement that is made by these actors, made exclusively by both of the parties. The relationship when you agree to engage into in a special relationship, for example, with your current partner is the good example of this, right? We believe that these type of actions are not the action that should not be intervened by countries. But furthermore, because sometimes putting your partner's name in a registry oversimplify the problem that you have, ladies and gentlemen. People would know that you lie. But the problem that exists behind it, why are you lying, for example, is very complex to begin with, right? What makes you lie is very personal to you, because maybe it's just your preference to ghost someone because you are not matched with certain individual, and maybe you have a bad communications, or maybe you cannot talk the problems out because maybe when you tell your problems, it can trigger certain trauma, for example, recalling certain things that you cannot bear, for example. There are so many externalities as to why people lie and cannot tell the truth, ladies and gentlemen. The motion is bad because this public registry, ladies and gentlemen, aim to objectify the subjective, right? The nuance, if we have the public register, for example, sets the narrative that our actions are objectively bad, ladies and gentlemen, but the nuance can be more complex than that, right? We have our own story and so on and so forth, right? So I think that this is something that is extremely bad under proposition side of the house. But number two, why the decision that you made is not rational to begin with, right? Notice that when you have a problem in a certain relationship, for example, there is no any kind of right or wrong when it comes to the problem about relationship, right? Because this is highly contingent on which lenses do you see the problem for. However, sometimes the moment when you decide to list your partner, ladies and gentlemen, this might not be the most rational state of mind for you to make a certain decision, for example, because sometimes you are clouded with your anger. For example, when you are being lied to, when you are being cheated to, ladies and gentlemen, when you it's okay for you to be angry, but I think that making for you to have your anger to be clouded your decision, for example, this is the reason why this is not necessarily a state where you are able to make a decision to begin with, right? We think that this is very detrimental for certain individuals, because I don't necessarily see any kind of mechanization that is coming from the government. How are they going to counterbalance any kind of information that is inserted to this particular public registry at the end of the day, right? So this is the reason why, because we, for example, cannot measure the detrimental impacts of you lied, or you being cheated, for example, ladies and gentlemen. I think that this is something that we cannot entertain under their server house, because what is the comparative under our sort of the house, right? I think that if you want to better certain individuals, I think the idea of cancel a culture that currently exists in the status quo about someone's lie or someone cheating within their relationship, ladies and gentlemen, is already a benefit within and of itself, right? At the very least, in cancel culture in media, we have certain discussions. We can see the certain problems towards several lenses, ladies and gentlemen. The problem with this public registry, you are only putting the name without any kind of counterbalance mechanism as to why this is true. For example, this is the reason why the idea of discussion and objectifying certain cases to happen under your server house is not going to be objective. Very proud to stand on team opposition.
Thank you so much. Oh, next DPM.
Okay, am I audible?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, wait, set my timer first. Sorry, my stage in 3, 2, 1. Before moving on to my argument, I would like to rebut some points coming from the opposition side of the house. So basically, they're saying that they don't want this registry to happen at all, because everyone's problem is diverse, because everyone has because behind everything that is being reported, every problem, we cannot know that we cannot know what kind of problem hides behind it. But first point of view, well, I will please notice that this is entirely not important, right? So, for example, when you're reporting a crime, when you're reporting some sort of murder or any kind of crime, the motive behind it doesn't really matter, right? Because all you have to know is that person actually does the kind of mistake, that person actually lied, or maybe that person is actually abusive, etc. The point that is needed to be known by the future couple is that there is a tendency for their future boyfriend or their future girlfriend to be like that, ladies and gentlemen. There is a possibility for a person to lie, regardless of the kind of motive. So what we're trying to say here is, under the outside of the house, where we implement a world where this registry happens, we're just giving awareness to those people that there this kind of possibility exists, right? So if those people still choose to regardless of what's happening with that person's past relationships, then we will think that it is okay, right? But moreover, though, if they, even if under their side of the house, manage to prove to you how it is how harmful it is, but finally, please notice that this kind of thing is actually very, very important in the very first place, right? And it will be explained later on my argument. But lastly, how is it even better under our side of the house? Well, under their side of the house, they keep on mentioning that how under their side of the house, they don't want people's information about people to be spread public. But we don't understand, like, what's the difference between you giving this kind of registry for people, for all to know that there's a name and there's a crime, with what they're trying to say, that the idea of cancel culture is enough. We don't understand why cancel culture is okay, but a world where this registry exists is not okay. And now, moving on to my argument, here I'm to bring talk. First of all, I'm going to talk about how under our side of the house we will manage to achieve the pursuit of happiness from those people by moving on. Well, talking about the tendency, the characterizations of people, there are two tendencies of what people will feel after breaking up, or post relationship. Like, the first tendency is of the people who are going to keep on blaming themselves. panel, there will be people that are very heartbroken, and they will keep on overthinking. They will keep on blaming themselves because their relationship that didn't work, and they will think that, oh, it is all my fault. I should have been better. I should have I etc., etc. And they will think that it is a loss for them to lose their partner, for example. But finally, under our side of the house, where there will be a scenario where we will not take some sense into them, where being that person is going to broke up with that with their ex. At least those people will know that, right? There would be a possibility for them to know that, oh, it's okay. Actually, it's okay for me to break up with that person, because first of all, that person is abusive, because they're not nice to me, because they lie every time, and they're never honest to me, etc., right? So under our side of the house, those people will be given the possibility for them to have the kind of comfort that they needed, right? So it will end their continued sufferings of blaming themselves. But second tendency, though of how there are some people that actually knows that they're not wrong. They actually know that their ex was the one that was in the wrong, but they keep full of feelings bottled up, right? So under there's outside of the house, the second thing that's going to happen is how they're going to be happy by moving on from actually like ranting about their ex through this kind of registry, and they will feel better, right? Because they will feel better because of the knowledge that at least this person will be punished. The society will know that how bad that person treated them, and and they will took satisfaction from it, and yeah, they will be satisfied because of the knowledge that that there are so many people that know about those kind of people's flaws, right? Those kind of people's wrongdoings. So that person will notice that people will no longer blame them, and will blame their actions instead. But why is it important though? Because we must notice that, like, on terms of going to another relationship, moving on is a very important thing, right? Because of difficulty of moving on actually help someone on achieving a healthier relationship. But moreover, though, on second argument about how under of the house there will be a sort of self-reflection for the people who are being reported and being confirmed that they are indeed guilty. So under our set of the house, where those people would be reported and they would be confirmed guilty, there will be like some there will be some consequences from the public, right? For example, they're being condemned because they are being abusive, for example, or they're being condemned because they're so very demanding and controlling. And from there will be like a sort of reflection for those people, right? Because the characterizations of the ones who are in the wrong actually in some there are not some tendency for those people to actually at first they don't know that they're wrong. They always think that what they're doing is actually right. So what they're actually needing here is a push, right? It's a trigger from outside, like a trigger that it's coming directly at them, not the things that are in social media that talks like there are a lot of information about toxic relationships. They will not read that, but the thing that is going to reach them are the things that are impacting them, that are impacting them, right? The things that are actually like condemning them, so that way they will know that they're wrong. They will know that there's a reason why there are so many people that are condemning their behaviors. So that way it will if in the future it will give them even more chance to reflect on themselves, more chance on fixing in their behaviors, etc. But I know even if in the worst scenario where those people are managed to change, and maybe they're doing that because of something, for people who keep condemning them, we believe that it is okay, right? Because even though there are like some things behind their fault, at least we believe that when someone choose to do something, if they choose to lie, they choose to be abusive, etc., etc., it is their own decisions, right? So what comes after is all should be in their consent because they're in the wrong. So that's why we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, DPM. Next DLO.
Um, I cannot turn on my camera because my laptop is broken. My preferred method of receiving POI is via chat, so please do not unmute yourself. And my preferred gender pronoun is nothing, so you can call me anything you want. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. One, I'm going to talk about, is it the duty of state to even intervene in relationships? Number two, I'm going to talk about, can government mechanism actually make relationship better, or will it be worse under their side of the house? So first, let's talk about, is it within the duty of the state to intervene in relationship? Chair, before you even credit all of 40-minute speech of government explaining how they will make relationship better on their side, which we will debunk soon, what you should ask yourself first is, do state have the duty to accommodate every concern that people have? Because logically speaking, if like for example, if I have a good gaming chair and a good gaming laptop, and someone wanted to have very good value of entertainment, which is emotionally fulfilling to him, it is not the obligation of the state to even actually intervene and like force me to give that gaming laptop to him, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that there should be a metric that is defined by the government as to why the state should intervene in the first place. This is something that the opposition have attempted to define, and government have not responded to it at all. What do we tell you? One, we tell you that this is a private issue that should not exist in the public sphere. Why is it important? Because note that the state always operates on the basis of giving people personal responsibility, in the sense that we do intervene in when there is a problem that is so dire that it becomes public safety concerns, but when it comes to personal conflict, you should leave it to yourself. It is not the duty of the state to intervene. And moreover, it is something that is very emotionally damaging to these individuals when they know that that specific and sensitive information of them lying, of them ghosting, has been publicized in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, notice that the harm in terms of the mentality and of the emotions of these people, especially after we have told you that oftentimes the nuance is much more complex than that. Even if I lie to someone, it does not mean that I am a bad individual. Perhaps that this person is someone that is bothering me constantly, and I simply don't want to deal with the person anymore. And so that's why I go to the person, for example. But all of these nuances is going to be completely abandoned by the government side of the house. What's going to be seen is that I am a bad person because I ghosted someone, and of course that is very damaging to myself. But then our government says that, oh guys, it doesn't matter on the motive, because when we report crime, motives does not matter anyway. This is not true. When you commit a crime, before it is formally recognized as a crime, there is a complete and thorough investigation on the matter. You are going to be asked whether or not you kill someone in self-defense, or whether or not you kill someone because you are evil, for example. If you kill someone in self-defense, it will not be classified as a murder, but it will be classified as self-defense. The comparative is, when you talk about this non-criminal relationships thingies, it is something that is very subjective, and like the common rhetoric is that feelings are valid, right? Like, I feel that the person ghosted me. I feel that the person has been controlling to me, which means that the ability for the government to identify the complex nuances of all these things is going to be completely non-existent under their side of the house. Government needs to respond to that. Lastly, what I'm going to add to this is that the idea that government does not accommodate irrational made decisions. What we need to understand here is that relationships oftentimes involve complete and intense emotions. And when it comes to these kinds of decisions, to like report your partner's bad behavior to the state, oftentimes it is made under duress. Oftentimes it is made under very emotionally intense situations. And since I've told you before that oftentimes the state attempted to even cut down on the rational decisions that people made, which is why, for example, we put a tax on extremely fat foods or like on unhealthy foods. It does not fit into the parameter of what state is supposed to do. So this concludes my first flash. Pragmatics aside, it is not within the duty of state to intervene. Secondly, then, let's talk about, can government mechanism can actually make relationship better. Okay, so the first claim that PM brought is the idea that oftentimes there is very flowery expectation of relationships, such as, for example, Korean drama that tells everyone to live happily ever after when they engage in a relationship. It's true. Then the question becomes, is it the only factor influencing people's decision when evaluating a relationship? We don't think so. We have three counter factors that influences people's minds. Number one, Twitter and social media oftentimes posted on how someone should not be judged on their first impression, or like toxic relationship is also viral. And I think that this is a good stepping point for people to realize that relationship is not as ideal as what Korean drama is portraying. Number two, oftentimes you have friends and relatives who have been through the bad relationships themselves and can share to you that you should not be naive and like just act on the relationship on a completely good faith manner. And number three, Even if we talk about pop media such as Korean drama, oftentimes it also depicts bad sides of relationship. It does not only depict like you live happily ever after, but it also depicts things like toxic relationships, cheating, and so on and so forth. Hence, the factors that you identify under opposition is much more much more massive in scale, I mean, in comparison to the singular example that government side of the house brought. But even if we are going to be extremely charitable here, note that the harm that they have is at best expectations, and expectations oftentimes exist only on the initial level. Ladies and gentlemen, it can change. How can people change their expectations to be much more healthy? This leads me to my next rebuttal. Government claims that people oftentimes use past to hide their behavior, and somehow this is bad. We have three responses to this. Number one, note that adults will know eventually the true sides of people. Because do note that when you get personally close to someone, psychologically speaking, and this is just how the human brain operates, you let go of the mask that you do, and this is something that is primal. So for example, if I do makeup towards the date of someone that I love, when I get personally close to that individual, my instinct to be to stop wearing makeup and to show my true size of personality, which means to say that the signs of the negativity of someone is going to be feasible even before you engage in the relationship in the first place. That's number one. Number two, on a more realistic level, let's not kid ourselves. Everyone have life. Everyone have ghosted other people at some point of their life, which means that the harm under the government side of the house goes both ways, which means that the delta is practically zero. I don't get that benefit at all. But lastly, even if I'm going to be extremely charitable here, abusive relationship happens under their side, what's the comparative? Because Randy have told you that government have never mechanized how their benefits work. Under opposition side of the house, we're going to bring you three comparatives. Number one, the harm of this motion is that it's going to normalizes interactions done in bad faith, because the first impression that you have when you want to get close to someone is all of the bad records that people have, instead of like the good personalities and like the good jokes that this person have, for example, which means that you are going to be much more vigilant towards another individual, and the ability for you to even close to another person in the first place is going to be very minimum. And number two, note that the harm of this negativity goes beyond personal relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, do note that this information can be used to like judge another person as bad even before you attempted to befriend the person in the first place. And this is oftentimes unfair towards another person, ladies and gentlemen, which means that the harm goes beyond the relationship which what government identifies. This is not to say to intervene. This is very, at best, zero benefit, and at worst, very damaging towards relationship. Oppose.
Thank you, DLO. Next, web government.
Okay, wait. So I will start my speech. In 3, 2, 1. Panel's love is not something that beautiful, it is a fact. If you ever heard that love is blind, yeah, that is true, panels. In our side of the house, as government, we does not want that happen. We does not want that people's blinded by love. It is better exist than nothing. This is something that will be a big point on this debate. The reasons why we say that it is better than nothing. We think that it's still better that that we provide something rather than we just stand up and careless for some people that are tormented with their partners. Because knowing that my second speaker already told you that how toxic relationship can be directing into mental health too, and this is really worse for the victims as well. Several things to note or clarifications. This motion is supposed to talk about how someone as a person in general prefers a world where this registry exists. So if we can prove to you why is it justified to do this and why this kind of registry exists and the effect towards the victim itself, or we say that victim in here who are people who have non-criminal partner, people who have ghosting partner, who have partner who are lying to them, etc. We can win in this debate. Moving to my classes, the rest of battles will be interpreted in my classes. So first clash, which side is justified to do this or no, which side is justified to do this kind of like a public registry or no. I also told you that this is justified because at the very first place, the moment when you are in a relationship with someone, we are tied to each other. It means that you when we are having a relationship, it means that you're gonna interact with them almost every day, right? It is important that we have to having this kind of a public registry, because in the end of the day, partners have to know their partners. They are having commitment together, which means they have to accept each other. We think that in the end of the day, we provide this kind of a public registry as a counterbalance, as a protection towards the victim itself. But my first speaker told you why registry, why we need this kind of a public registry, because it's status quo. So what is the status quo? My first speaker already told you that there is an unhealthy expectations. That expectations are not that beautiful. Love is not that beautiful. We can see the status quo. There's a problem. There's an high expectations, romanticizations on romance life, on partners towards man or woman. We think that even if their side already told you, giving a response, that there's an in the Twitter, there's a post about how toxic relationship is dangerous. We think that is not enough panels. We think that we still need this kind of a public registry, because in the end of the day, people are still having a false hope. And my first speaker told you why in the end of the day people just give their fake face at the very first place. Is because they want to look good at the first impression, so that their partners want to date them, for example, like that, right, panels. So we think that in the end of the day, we prove to you why the status quo are really problematic, and we need this kind of a public registry too. And also, like we can see the status quo, how Korean drama impacting your brain and directing that you having high expectations towards someone, especially for teenagers who are still does not understand about love. We think that it is important to note that they are still having an emotions that are very hard to that are very impacting to their mental health too, right, panels? That's why we need this kind of a public registry. And also, we told you that why in the end of the day, if we're having this kind of a public registry, we can have a healthy relationship. They can realize, people can notice that their partners are wrong. People are blinded by love. So let's compare to their side of the house. Opposition case basically talk to you that there's a certain conditions that might be agreed by only one party. These types of actions should not be interfered. What makes you lie is different in each other, and it's so subjective, right, panels? So responses. This is not true, because government, they having regulations to protect every civilian, and we think that this is something that are really important to take a note, and this is only the only way for government to protect civilians itself. But secondly, even though everyone have their own stories and government should not interfere this, we think that in the end of the day, they have to interfere. Why? Because what opposition side need to know is that you cannot see how people feels. You cannot read people's mind. You are not psychiatrists. We does not know how they feel. And opposition side can tackle how people's are so cannot tackle how people's are so afraid. Victims are so afraid to tell to their family, because they does not want their family feel sad or etc. We think that in the end of the day, they want to report to the government in the end of the day. So we think that if they told you that there is already check and balance, such as like family, friends, we think that is still not enough. That's why we need this kind of a public registry too. But last but not least, even though this is privacy, we think that it's still okay for us to interfere in the end of the day. This is the only way that we can provide to the victims itself. But they questioning to you how we're gonna do counterbalance. If opposition questioning to you that, we think that there is a check and balance, like there is an independent investigation, and it can ensure that if these people are tracked in the record, it means that they do this. It is the fact. But second clash, which is which it can giving a betterment towards the victim itself. I also told you that this is in the status quo itself, people are most likely feeling guilty, because we think that they are the one who feel like it is because them they're feeling guilty, and we think that this is really bad for their mental health, right, panels? As my second speaker already told you, in the end of the day, how are gonna fixing this problem is that when people know this, or civilians know this, they will tell the victims that they are not wrong, that their partner are the one who wrong, and they should not feeling guilty towards their partners in the end of the day. But there is no response towards this kind of an argument. But secondly, we told you how in the end of the day we can giving a reflections towards the people's or the one who ghosting, etc. We think that even if in the end of the day they cannot having corrections or reflections towards themselves, we think this is still okay, because we did our best. It is better to exist than nothing. I think that it is better that we provide something that can giving them reflections better than their side of the house only told you why government cannot interfere, right, panels? Comparing to opposition side of the comparing to opposition case, they basically told you that under our side peoples will report irrationally. We think that it's also happen under both sides when peoples are abused, when they will cry, they will stress, and they will report it too. So they're also having an emotional, which is also gonna be irrational. But last but not least, worst case versus best case. Their best case is that people that government cannot interfere and there is no subjective thing. And our worst case is that people are still afraid to tell to the government or registers towards this kind of like a public registry. Personally, we think it's better in our side of the house because it is unlikely to happen because they would protected by society and government and they will not feeling guilty in the end of the day. But secondly, our side can at least provide something to give them courage so that they want to tell the government in the end of the day. That's why we were so proud to propose. Thank you.
All right. Next is opposition whip.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, bentar ya, set timer dulu. Okay, a bit disclaimer. If my speech will sound a little bit of vulgar, I'm sorry, but this is relationship. So if we do not talk about sex, what are we talking? Okay, gonna start. Wait. Okay, gonna start in 3, 2, 1. A judge in a world where it is filled with people coming from multiple backgrounds of culture, social preference, gender roles, sexual preference, for example, or like so much in a world right now, it is totally unnecessary to intervene in personal lives, nor to regulate who you want to date, or saying that someone is really bad or someone is not bad. I think that is something that is really unnecessary at the end of the day. But a little bit of caveat, I think that when you have a motion of like this house prefers in the world, I think that we also need to talk about government responsibility and to what extent that government can intervene and what areas are there are needed to be, for example, controlled by the government side of the house. I think that this big chunk of argumentation was not talked at all by our government side of the house. I think that the positive side never really have a structural argumentation on to which extent government should regulate people. I think that in and of itself gives the win to the opposition side of the house. I'm going to talk about two things. Number one, whether or not it's justified for the state to intervene in this particular area. Number two, I'm going to talk about further impacts. The first argumentation, I'm going to talk about two sub-layers of our clash. Number one, about feasibility, and number two, the degree of harms. I'm just going to be charitable and fit their argumentations in these clashes because I feel like with the nature of government not being structured enough, I feel like it kind of lost its constant, stability of the argument. Okay, talking about feasibility. Judge, if you wanna, for example, this is a punishment, right? Because when you are actually releasing this data, it means that you are going to punish the person, you are airing their dirty laundry, right? In order for you to punish someone, it means that you need to argue whether or not it's feasible to actually determine someone's culpability. So for example, if you want to talk about sex registry, it's really feasible for you to determine, for example, there are witnesses, or when we're talking about sexual assault, it means that there are there are marks, for example, or there are literally like a lot of standard of procedures to actually determine whether someone is culpable or not. But when you're being ghosted by someone, usually it's not determined, and it cannot be deemed as right or wrong. So there are thousands of factors at the end of the day. For example, someone's dominance or not, like someone, whether or not they are dominant or not, like for example, or like their career, or like their money, or they are actually they are actually ex of your friends, for example, or they are bad in bed, their blowjob is horrible, they have small penis. There are just so many things that can really cancel or break the deal of a relationship, right? So when a person ghosted someone because of this, which is totally okay, because of there are just preference exists, and something preference exists, and that's totally fine. When you're going to paint them as evil, for example, you cannot quantify and you cannot calculate what something that is really universally attractive or not, right? Because there are a lot of things such as, like, for example, taste and etc etc. So under their side of the house, you are forcing someone to be in a relationship in which that they need to accept the person 100%, which is not at all something that we actually want. And I think that because of relationship dynamics, that is definitely is a really bad thing. So at the end of the day, if there are deal breakers, yeah, it's totally fine. If you can, for example, work towards the person and talk to them what are the things that they don't like, it's totally also fine. That is why you also see a lot of successful relationship stories right now. Like there are a lot of, like, for example, successful relationship stories that actually are stay in a lot of time, right? And also number two is that there are, in a lot of times, the life actually gives you a lot of dynamics, right? For example, you move away, you have LDR, for example, and it's really hard for and your love language is, for example, physical touch, and they ghosted you because they cannot handle you anymore. Like, I think that that's totally something that is really fine. You'll just learn to move on. Please, we are humans, we are strong, okay? We can deal with heartbreaks. I think that government is being, like, for example, manja and say that the state should give us Chris Evans, or the state should give us, like, really the guys that are on Hallmark channel that is really soleh and rich and will obey to you and will go to your parent and marry you. That is not the fairy tale that we live in. We already live in this kind of world. We already cope. There are a lot of mechanisms to cope, and I think that government does not make sense at all. The first point is that when you cannot actually determine the feasibility, you cannot base the law on subjectivity, right? Because what Kushay already told to you, subjectivity will definitely play here, right? Because someone can deem another one as, like, for example, lying or manipulative, but it's not necessarily the case. So this principle on law is something that is really bad, and this is not feasible. It's not feasible at all to really determine the culpability of someone, right? So under their world, you are going to base a law under subjectivity, which is very much harmful, which is chaotic, and which is something that is really bad under their side of the house. Number two is that the degree of harms. We already told to you that the degree of harms, you literally do not have any harms under our side of the house. Number one, you actually have a check and balance. What we do mean by this is that a lot of the times people, when they hurt another people, when they ghosted on, or when they lie, there are a trend of, like, in Twitter, for example, saying that Mas A is definitely someone that is really bad, you cannot date them. Or you have, like, for example, social circles, you can definitely gossip with your friends saying that, yeah, his blowjob is not very good, do not engage, do not, like, for example, talk to him, or, like, don't marry him or anything. Right? I think these are the things that already exist, and I think that's perfectly fine. Even on the worst case, like, for example, people who are manipulative, we think that seeing red flags are also something that we can use, or, like, these are the things that at least there are a degree of truth that are being said. I think in comparison with government side of the house, there are literally only one person reporting, and there are no mechanisms of investigations. There are literally no dimensions of truth in government side of the house in comparison to under our side of the house. Socially, you can cancel someone. I think this is much better in comparison, right? Second of all, talking about the, like, further impacts, right? I think that also, lastly, on the idea of, like, government's responsibility, government is not responsible for your mental health issue. Like, for example, government is responsible for giving, like, for example, subsidy towards, like, psychiatrists, like, but the government does not have the responsibility to the extent of giving you a husband or giving you a wife that is really ideal in your eyes, or like 100% good people. If you want good people, attract the good people. Socially, the world is a social game. Figure out yourself. This is something that is really, realistically speaking, and we think that government is not realistic at all, right? On further impacts, we already tell you there are a lot of loopholes that people can use for to cancel each other, for example, or after a bad date, or after something that is really like subjectively bad happening, they can cancel another people. The world will be chaotic, so much chaotic on government side of the house. You will be stuck with people that does not, like, for example, please you. Breakup exists. The world right now is much better. We're very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Ocean Web. Next, Ocean Reply.
Okay, 1 minute. All right. going to start my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. Just to clarify once again, just because the motion is worded as this House prefers a world, it does not mean that we should not talk about what a key actor is supposed to do. Hence, government's argument about state duty still matters. I don't think that the chair should discuss that. With that said, I'm going to talk about two things. One, do the state have duty to intervene in relationships? Number two, can this actually help relationship on a pragmatic level, which is basically like 21 minutes of government speech. One, let's talk about how do states have duty. So my analogy remains unresponded. If I am going to be mentally ill, if I don't have a gaming laptop, it does not mean that the state have duty to provide me with a gaming laptop. Okay, there's a degree of limit to the things that government can intervene, and we have brought you 3 metrics on this regard. One, we talk about personal responsibility. We talk about how some issues are supposed to be reserved to the private sphere, and government is not supposed to intervene on that. Number two, we talk the idea of you making subjective things objective, and this is something that is very damaging to individuals, because this is going to be a label that is very creating a perception that I am a bad individual, or even that person is going to be seen by other people as bad individuals as well. Like what Kini said, it is a punishment. Unlike criminal justice system that is much more objective, the narrative that all feelings are valid is going to create much more chaos. Our argument still stands. Number three, we also told you that government does not tolerate irrationality when it comes to accommodating concerns. All of these 3 metrics, if completely unresponded on their side of the house, like the only thing that they said is the idea that motive does not matter when it comes to reporting criminal crimes, which I have told you is not valid. Criminals are assessed in a very extensive manner. So the first clash obviously goes to us. Secondly, let's talk about, can this actually help relationship or not? Okay, so the claim that they say is basically that oftentimes people have false hope because people watches K-dramas. The opposition side of the house have brought you more structural reasons about the forces that makes people are objective eventually. We talk about how social media oftentimes have viral posts that makes people objective. We talked about how friends can share, like what Kini said, perhaps this person they have not a good sexual experience, for example, or even K-dramas themselves. Oftentimes, this will only depict like flowery depictions of relationships. Government will only repeated what PM said, which is basically like, guys, people watch K-dramas and so we should protect them. All of our responses still flies. Secondly, they talk about fake masks, and we have responded to this by saying 2 things. Number one, people will naturally know, like because it is just the human tendency for us to like shed our mask when we get personally close individuals. Kindi have extended this by saying that red flags is something that's visible towards individuals. And number 3, I have told you as well that the delta is 0 on the other side, given that, like, let's just be frank, nobody has never lied and nobody has never ghosted other people on their life. Hence, all of government's argument about how people are going to be more bold, they are going to take more drastic steps when it comes to be more assertive on relationships, does not fly. It is unnecessary given the context that people are going to be aware about the bad sides of people anyway. So their argument, this cannot fly if our argument remains unresponded, and it was unresponded on their side of the house. But let us be completely charitable here. Even if somehow the note is like gone, and like you can only assess like the last minute of the debate, for example, what's the comparative is something that you should assess. On the comparative, we told you 2 things. Number 1, we told you that this normalizes interactions in bad faith, in the sense that people are not going to be willing to even interact with people positively because their impression is that, oh, this person is a liar, this person is a ghoster, which means that the ability for people to even be close to another person is going to be non-existent. Secondly, we told you that this goes beyond relationship, in the sense that even when we talk about friendships, even when we talk about how someone is perceived in public, that is going to be negative as well. How you should assess this argument is simple. Our harm is universal, while government's harm is situational, in the sense that government's benefit can only fly when you are in a toxic relationship, which we have told you does not exist in our case, but our harm exists in like literally all parts of life, all circumstances that you do socially. We are so proud to oppose.
Thank you. Opposition reply. Lastly, government reply.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Finally, in my speech, I would like to talk about 2 issues that have come here. First of all, on the justification level, and the second of all, we're going to talk about which world is provides better things for for the people, especially the couple. So on the justification level though, and there are others of the house, they're trying to tell you that actually if we're talking about relationships or how people decide to live their life, it shouldn't be anything that should be regulated by the government, because people should not be spoiled. They should be the ones who are deciding what they're going to do with life, etc. But please notice, we cannot just justify them just saying that everyone is inherently able to make they say decide their own decisions, especially when they're dealing with relationships that they don't want, relationships that are toxic, relationships that are actually wrong for them. But notice that the characterizations of those people who are in this relationship that has already been explained under ourselves of the house, if the people are actually such things, right? Actually, when they're in that relationship, for someone when they're entering the relationship, for them to actually realize that there will be risk in the relationship, that relationship is not only about love. Actually, it needs intervention, right? So it needs again intervention from the government, because in otherwise those people would not get out from those kind of relationships. But moreover though, they also told you about how uh, actually motive matters. The things that those that pushes those people to do those kind of mistakes matter, and should be counted. But these panels, please notice that even if those things happen, we've already told you that regardless of those things, that they're actually at fault, right? So even if those things matters, it would matter for the people who are actually like who are actually in contact with them, right? So it depends on the motive of why they're doing things. Actually, even if it matters, it doesn't like have that kind of significant impact, right? Because regardless of the motive, they've actually done the damage. They've already done the thing. So they cannot just argue that, oh, actually I lied because I cannot tell you that actually I was being abusive because of because I have a really bad past relationship, etc. No, it is no way to justify someone to not be counted as guilty just because of those kind of motives, right? And even if there are and when they're to tell you that actually it is not justified for the government to follow, right, like things that are being decided when someone is being very irrational or very emotional. But we notice, well, that in other cases, and actually crimes, etc., actually there actually a lot many things are done in the same manner, right? Why? Because when we're talking about people like emotions, irrationality, etc., those are the kind of things that follows people, right? What is the reason why people are reports the under? Actually, it is because they feel something, because they feel anger, because they feel that it is unfair, because they feel that those people have wronged them in some way. So that is exactly why people all report the others, right? But moreover, though, on which world is better? Under us of the house, we've already told you about how people will not change by themselves, right? They need extra triggers from the outside, and people will not realize that they're wrong unless they're having the extra triggers. So under the result of the house, they're trying to tell you about how it would be damaging for people, because for example like people would just expect everything to be perfect. But no, panel, actually it is the kind of thing that is more likely to happen under the cell of the house, because at least under of the house, because of the existence of the registry, at least we will like make those people realize that there is exactly some flaws that are lying on their future partners, right? It will make them like lower their expectations for their relationships. And if in terms of changing themselves, even if those people are like they're antagonizing themselves because of the like they're beating themselves just because they're actually evil, they're abusive, etc. We believe that for those perpetrators it is okay, because at least it is the only thing that can be done for them to actually have the chance to change and reflect. So that is why we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Should we wait for Randy first or just
Katanya nggak apa-apa sih.
nggak apa-apa tuh, nggak apa-apa nunggu apa nggak apa-apa langsung?
Ya, lanjut aja.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Starting my education in 3, 2, 1. Thank you guys for the debate. I think it was a really insightful debate lah. So I have 3 part in my educations. Number 1 on general comments. And secondly, on the decisions. Thirdly, about the reasoning. So number one, general comments. I know that rightly general comment is not advisable, but I feel like it's also important to point it out what's lacking in the debate in of itself. So yeah. So I think that only one general comment that I wanted to point out is that I feel like both side of the house have certain degree of reluctancy on engaging the worst case of either side of the house. So, for example, in the government side of the house, you don't necessarily engaging to the questions coming from oppositions. That is, which is also the burden coming from government side of the house to explain on the worst case scenario on what if what if the submissions coming from the registry is not rational coming from those previous partner in of itself. I feel like if you don't engage with this worst case, I feel like it could it could significantly harm your impact of your case because so I feel like you need to point that out of why exactly this actually is irrational, or even if it is even if it is irrational, it is okay to be done. Secondly, on the oppositions, so I feel like you don't necessarily explain to me on what if it's already imposing certain harm toward those individual when they're already existing in a relationship. Like for example, like those I think like government has implicitly said this on how like it imposed like mental trauma to those individuals when they already being trapped into those like toxic relationship. I feel like the mechanism coming from oppositions was only saying that only like there is an extension of cancel culture, for example, but it just like exposing the awareness of like future people to actually like not actually engaging to it, or like the people who actually like do the cancel culture is the one who already being imposed to certain to those like mental trauma that government said. So I feel like it need to mitigate it more on why exactly like imposing those mental trauma is okay to those individuals, to actually like make your argument much more nuanced and just not like being dismissed, like being defensive in your nature of argument. So the decisions, I give the winning toward the oppositions under two general classes. Number one, on the idea of justifications. Secondly, on the impact to the individual, particularly the one who exists in the registry. So number one on the justification, which is I think that this is something which that is the bigger class of the debate. So there are three things three arguments that exist in these classes. Number one, on government saying that we want this is justified because we want to spread the awareness of future bad relationship that might happen to those individuals. Secondly, in the opposition side of the house, they brought upon the idea of duty of state and execution of law regulations, and why like this is not like the ideal law regulations that state could have imposed in their country. Thirdly, on the rationality of individual who admit the sexual not sexual legacy, the let's say the guest-like registry lah, just to example one of them and to simplify the case. But so on the idea of awareness, like that government said, right? I feel like um oppositions, why I cannot buy the government side of the house argument in the idea of awareness is because I feel like oppositions has actually managed to engage to this by saying that number one, that it doesn't need this kind of registry to know the true nature of those individuals, because most likely these people already like exposing their like sign of vulnerability or like quote unquote red flag that exists during the process of the relationship when you're close to this person. Like for example, DLO saying that like people will going to remove their makeup when they're close with someone because they're comfortable with that someone, and that's where like the idea of vulnerability and the quote unquote red flag will going to access. I feel like the likelihood was really robust on that. But secondly is that um government's premise was under the idea that awareness is lacking status quo, because there is an over glorifications of perfect relationship that exists in popular media. I feel like oppositions was already engaging to this by saying that there's also already counter narrative even in popular media. For example, like if you want to talk about K-drama, there's also K-drama that expose the idea of like toxic relationship, like lying and ghosting and whatnot. Thirdly, though, that and the idea of awareness, I feel like oppositions was also propose a counter alternative to this by saying there's already cancel culture, which I feel like in that response of government in that example, government only questions about the justification of cancel culture, of why cancel culture is enough, but does not like break the comparative logic of why exactly then cancel culture is less ideal rather than the registry that you want to propose. So that's why I feel like the first point is won by oppositions. Secondly, on the idea of duty of state and execution of like law regulations, opposition proposed on the idea on how like governments does not have responsibility to do this, because they only like have responsibility when it impose harm to the state. Secondly, is on the idea, for example, like oppositions will explain on how like you cannot like determine one's capability because it's very subjective, and that's why like in law principle it does not adhere to that. So I feel like governments have minimal response to this, unfortunately. The only responses that I can catch was that coming from government web, that government have responsibility to protect everyone. But even though this is a good assertion, but unfortunately there is not enough characterizations of why government actually have those sense of responsibility to begin. Even though that it is intuitive that governments have responsibility to protect, but not necessarily you need to explain on the number one why exactly it is within the nature of government in order for me to like buy it and not stepping it in. Secondly is that why the responsibility to protect is to a certain extent of providing those standards of like perfect individual, especially when this point has been pointed out by DLO and opposition web by saying that governments, if you talk about protections, governments only protections of like mental harm, for example, like subsidizing psychiatry, but not providing like perfect individual that you want to begin with. That is why I feel like second point won by oppositions. Thirdly, lastly, on the first classes is on the idea of rationality, on how like those individuals are like irrational because they are overclouded by anger. But secondly, it's oversimplify the problem, even though it's much more complex than that, and therefore like government need to like look into the nuance of the problem in of itself, and that's why the registry is not justified. So unfortunately, also governments have not have minimal responses to this. The only responses was that motive does not matter. Like as long as it shows like the tendency to do it, it doesn't matter. But I feel like oppositions was also already engaged to that premise by saying that by explaining the parallel parallel like talk experiment, for example, like the normal CGS process also look at the motive, and that's why there's investigations to those individuals why they do those bad actions to begin with. So the questions then that governments need to answer is that why the process is different, why the process that like the existing CGS right now has is different with how you investigate or like how you regulate personal relationship. That is why I feel like those premise of like motive does not matter as in the end does not stand. That's why in the first classes overall oppositions win. So secondly, on the impact to individual, particularly the one who like going to be admitted in registry, but also like the one who going to experience the relationship. So what oppositions bring was that it's going to wreck someone's reputation that's beyond personal relationship. Governments brought on how this is going to how this is incentivized for individual to become better. Thirdly, on how it's going to make the process of moving on become better. So I'm going to talk about oppositions cases first. So on the idea of oppositions, what oppositions bring on the idea on how it wrecks someone's reputations, that is beyond personal. I think there's no responses on government, like no responses from government toward this idea on why this is actually justified. Because the justifications that government had at best is just making sure that those people cannot access normal relationship, but not to extra degree of like cannot access the society in general. That is why I feel like the extra degree of the harm that the proposal will impose is not mitigated by the government. That's why opposition's argument on this point still stands. So secondly, on the idea of incentivize for individual to become better. So unfortunately, I didn't hear any direct responses from oppositions in regard to this. But the reasons the impact of this argument, even though that even if I have to buy government's argument, is minimal. to the debate is that I don't understand betterment of individual is more important and likely in comparison to the destroying those individuals through the exposure of public registry in the first subclasses on the in the first subclasses that I already pointed out, right? So that's why I feel like the impact of this of betterment of individual, even though it's very potential, I feel like it does not like magnified by the governments to actually like overthrown or the whole opposition's argument in that in that comparison. Lastly, is government's better how like government said it's going to like create better moving on process. So I feel like the premise was that that government set on how like this going to give degree of comfort in comparison to like self-blaming that in comparison to self-blaming that they could have had in opposition side of the house. So even though again it doesn't being that much engaged by opposition side of the house, I cannot buy this particular argument to that big, because I don't see the direct causal link of how exactly the process of you blaming yourself that actually like the ending of the relationship, it is your fault, to when admitting the registry you then have like this degree of comfort that you want to begin with. So I feel like there is a certain big gap on that logical process on how exactly you can reach the benefit of degree the benefit of comfortability that you have toward this individual. So that's why I feel like the impact on this is unfortunately small in comparison to opposition's argument about like on how this is going to destroy someone, even not in the scope of personal relationship. That is why in overall oppositions with this debate. That is my adjudications. If you have any if you have any questions, if you want to have any feedback, or you want to like give me some feedback in regarding my educations, feel free to approach me through WhatsApp. Thank you.
Thank you, Dio.
Well, thank you, Dio. Thanks, everyone.